Welcome everybody to the Historical Society of Carroll County, Maryland's Box Lunch Talks. The BLTs today is on August 17th, and we have Brenda Black with us as our special speaker today. I wanted to say thank you to our program group who has done a great job of pulling this program together. And yes, we're being recorded. It will be hosted on our YouTube channel, and we will link that in with our website so that you can more easily find it. That's sort of a new feature we've managed to pull together in the last month or so. There will be a time for questions and answers right at the end. We're not going to interrupt Brenda while she's speaking. We'll hold those questions for the end, and there will be two different ways I'll explain to you how to ask questions. Just in your mind for now, you can just put your hand up and Lynn will recognize you and you can ask a question through the regular voice monitor, or I like it when you type in a chat message because that way I can sort of be thinking about those questions in advance. And I don't forget my questions if I type them into the chat feature, so you can do it either way. All right, well, without further ado, we're going to listen to Brenda Black. I love this description of her. It almost sounds like something poetic. She grew up on a small farm outside of the outskirts of Westminster in the 60s and 70s. Later, after graduating from high school in the 1980s, she went on to a career in administrative assistance field, serving 23 years with the Carroll County government. She also worked additional years in the community college setting and holds an associate degree in business administration, having attended Carroll Community College in Westminster. At this time in her life, Brenda is a writer as well as an artist. She's a resident of Hanover, Pennsylvania, where she lives with her husband, Clay, and their beloved dogs, Buffy and Tony. For fun, she enjoys camping, bike riding, golfing, and traveling to historic places and hiking. I would all like you to welcome Brenda with her talk today.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for letting me be here today. Thank you to the Historical Society, Chris and Lynn, and everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I'm here today to share with you a story about two precious people, handsome Pasquale Donofrio and Lena Casasanta Donofrio, my Italian grandparents. This is a photo from their marriage on January 19th.
Brenda, you have to share your screen. Go to the green button on Zoom. You'll see a green button at the bottom of your Zoom screen.
I apologize.
Okay, now we can see your slides. So now you want to hit start from the beginning. That's it. So we now are looking. Yeah, there you go. Go back.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
I apologize.
No problem. No problem at all. Thank you.
So before you is a photo of Pasquale and Lena Donofrio, my Italian grandparents. They were married January 19th, 1924. The Bella Rose and Dianthus Bobby invites you to explore the legacy of Pasquale and Lena as told through Beverly, Pasquale's caretaker. You'll join Pasquale in his search to find out what happened to his Bella Rose. You'll travel back in time, experience precise period details and authentic history. We'll trace Pasquale and Lena's footsteps and discover their essence as individuals. You'll witness Pasquale and Lena's love story. You'll find out their differences, challenges, celebrations, tragedy, heartbreak, deep regret, and much more. The background of how the story came to be. In the early 1900s, Lena's father worked as a coal miner in Ernest, Pennsylvania, Both of her parents were Italian immigrants. Lena was born in the coal mine town of Ernest in 1907, and the family moved to Geneva, New York in 1908. Pasquale, in December of 1920, left his homeland in Italy. He traveled to the United States, where he came to work in Geneva, New York, as a laborer for Rice Nurseries. He had a place that he stayed in Geneva, and a few years later, he met Lena. They married in 1924, started a family, and then the family soon after moved to Westminster, Maryland, and they eventually opened Carroll Gardens. I'll tell you about their children. John was a 1940s graduate of Westminster High School. He served in the Navy during World War II. He initially worked for Carroll Gardens for his father. He married Betty in 1949. They had 2 children, and John later went on to become a nationally acclaimed landscape architect. He was also very active in the Westminster community. Son, Harold, or Hal. He is a graduate of Westminster High School. He graduated in the mid-1940s. He served in the Army during the Korean War. He married in 1955, had 2 children, and he later went on to establish a large marketing and communications firm in Baltimore called Richardson, Myers, and Donofrio. Daughter, Dorothy, graduated in the late 1940s from Westminster High School. She attended Secretarial College in Geneva, New York, and after she graduated in the early 50s, she worked as a secretary at Sampson Air Force Base in New York, and that's where she met Ken. They married, they moved to Rockville, they raised 3 children, and Dorothy was employed by the Montgomery County school system, first as a cafeteria manager, and then as a secretary. Pasquale and Lena's daughter, Nancy, the youngest, she's my mother. She was a 1953 graduate of Westminster High School. Nancy, a month later, married her high school sweetheart, Calvin Dutterer. They moved to a small farm outside the city of Westminster. My mom, Nancy, she was a very busy lady. She raised 5 daughters, helped at the farm, and then she worked full-time as a bookkeeper at Drug Fair, and that later became Rite Aid in Westminster. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. My parents, Calvin Dutterer and Nancy Donofrio Dutterer, were married on June 20th, 1953. This is their wedding reception and held in downtown Westminster. On the left of the photo are Calvin's parents, Morris Dutterer and Elsie Lepo Dutterer. They were residents of West Main Street. On the right are Nancy's parents, Pasquale and Lena Donofrio. They lived at the time on Pool Road in Westminster, Maryland. When my parents married, soon after, this is a farmhouse that they bought located on Old Tonytown Road in a place called Fountain Valley in Westminster. And these are a few photos over the years. A 1964 photo when I was age 2, and I'm surrounded by family. 1966 photo as I was growing, and then a full family photo in 1972. I went on to work at Carroll County Government, and that's where I met my husband, Clay. It's a photo at the county office building in the conference room where our coworkers had thrown a wedding shower for us. On the right is a more recent photo of Clay and I and our 2 doggies. The inspiration for the book came from God, faith that he planted the seed in me way, way back. And then he nudged me over the years. He kept telling me that you've got to write the book. And I have, and I still have a love for my grandparents, a very special bond with my grandmother, and lots of precious memories through the years. And I had much curiosity about my grandparents. So in this photo, I'm age 6. I'm surrounded by my sisters and my cousins. Here's my grandmother holding my youngest sister, Billy. It was this time in my life that I became very curious about my Italian grandparents. I realized that my grandparents weren't like the grandparents of my friends. So beginning in the mid-60s, through adulthood, early adulthood, I started wondering. I had a lot of questions. I wondered, why didn't my grandparents live together? Why didn't they speak to one another? Or why didn't they ever visit each other? And then after my grandfather passed away, I learned that he held on to a photograph. He had it by his bedside in his final years of life. It was of a beautiful woman. I wondered and wondered what happened to them. After my grandfather's death, I also learned about the Dianthus poppy. Then, after conducting more and more research, I found out more details about my grandparents' journey. And then I realized that my grandparents had a really unique and significant story. It became my dream to share their story. And I also wanted the story to be woven with Lena's faith. My grandmother, Lena, was a devout Catholic, and I was very close to her, and she was my faith mentor, and she was always full of wisdom. The research and writing adventure. Before my 40s, I had already started some preliminary work, did some basic genealogy research. When I turned age 41, was turning 41 in 2003, Clay, my husband, knew that I wanted to get started on writing my grandparents' story. So he gave me a new laptop that year. And I started a basic outline at that time for the book. I knew that I had to find out a lot of information. So I began seeking help from family and relatives, people that knew my relatives, or maybe worked with them. And I'm always grateful to everyone that had contributed. Some examples of items that I would send out or receive is a letter to a relative in New York where I'm seeking questions about my relatives, and a questionnaire that my cousin Tom in New York completed and sent back to me. There were lots of these. So that I also was able to travel. Clay and I traveled to places for vacations, and while we were there, we'd visit individuals and interview them, or I interviewed them. And the information that I received was very valuable for my book research and family genealogy research. So all the interviews in person and written, they were instrumental for developing and creating storyline as authentically as possible. My mother, Nancy, she was the greatest contributor. Mom answered lots and lots of questions. On the right, you see stacks and stacks of papers. She completed questionnaires. She would travel with me because I had questions about lots of places. She came to my house and would identify millions and millions of relatives, seemingly millions, in photos I was unsure about. So she helped identify people, places, and dates. So I owe a great deal of thanks to my wonderful mom. Photographs are definitely treasures. Some photos that are shown here of Pasquale and Lena, and a wedding photo, their daughter, Dorothy, in 1952. These provided me just an example of the information that I can receive in photos, the detail. There's so much that I was able to pull to incorporate into storyline. An example of a photo from Pasquale and Lena's wedding party is shown on the left. This photo provides a great amount of detail. So when I was writing storyline about their wedding, I was able to get details from this photo. However, an announcement regarding their wedding in the Geneva Daily Times, New York newspaper, from 1924, gives me additional detail. For example, for just one item that I point out, Bertha, the maid of honor's wedding dress, bridal dress, looks like it's off-white in this photo, but actually it's jade green. And I learned that as a detail within the wedding announcement. Some Donofrio family photographs. Lena with her children, she looks very, very happy. And the children as well. Here's a photo of Nancy, my mother, in the center. And here's Pasquale at work in Carroll Gardens. The photo from the previous slide is brought forward. And the reason I did this is because this photo I had through the years wondered about. I didn't know where it was taken. Everyone looked so happy. I just always wanted to know where it was. So fast forward, more recently, when I had taken my mom out for a drive in Westminster, I wanted to find out from my mom, I wanted to find out about the first house that she lived in. It was located on Gorsuch Road in Westminster. And the photo in the lower right corner is the way that the location currently looks today. This is Gorsuch Road, just before Manchester Avenue. There's a Trainer's carpet store in this location and a place called The Cow. It's an ice cream shop. There used to be a duplex, like an old farmhouse, double-sided duplex house in this location. My mother was born in this house, and a tragedy occurred at this location. So I wanted details. But Mom, she was just born at the time, and she only lived in the house for just a few years, so she didn't have a lot of memories. So my mom put me in contact with a gentleman named Morris Coons. Morris and his family lived on the other side of the duplex next to the Donofrio family. Morris told me about a photo that he had, and this is the photo in the upper middle. The photo is of his brother Carl, his older brother Carl, and then it also includes John Donofrio and Harold Donofrio. So Morris shared with me a lot of his memories about the house that they lived in, information on the kerosene heater and all kinds of things on the inside of the house. And he also told me on the outside of the house, like in this photo, there was an outhouse, a stream that ran behind the property that the boys would dam in the summertime to cool down. So all of these memories from Morris really helped me develop an important part of the book where that tragedy occurred. So in finding out this information, I also was able to find out that that hillside in this photograph is in back of the Donofrio family home on Gorsuch Road. This is on the right-hand photo, upper right, is what that location currently looks like. Olive Garden would be to the right at the corner of Gorsuch, and then 140 now goes through this area. So that was really helpful finding. Genealogy research was conducted. I completed family research for the Casasanta family and also the Donofrio family. So this information was definitely important for storyline. Newspaper records were priceless. For example, I did spend a lot of time conducting newspaper research. One of the things that I wanted to find out was the growth of Carroll Gardens through the years. And this shows an article that was advertised in the Times in 1939. This shows the nursery stock that Carroll Gardens was carrying way back in the late 1930s. So just an example of one of many hundreds of details that you gleaned from newspapers, but incorporating precise details, I felt enhanced storyline, and it allows readers to envision and experience periods of time as authentically as possible. And through my research and writing adventure, God brought me some very special connections. And I'll tell you about a few of them. And there were many. The first is a gentleman named Michael Carmeiro. I met Michael by chance. He's a resident of Florida. One day, years ago, I needed to I wanted to try to identify individuals in a photo. This was from the photo in the lower corner is a photo that I posted on the Sons of Italy Geneva Lodge in New York, their site on their Facebook page. So I asked the question, okay, can anybody help me identify who the gentlemen are in this photograph? I said, the one on the far left is my great-grandfather, Gaetano Casasanta. Well, Michael happened to be checking Facebook one day and he saw my post. He started messaging me. And then we started emailing each other, trading information. And the reason is because Michael is a distant relative. I ended up finding out his great uncle, shown here with the blue arrow, his great uncle was Antonio Tony Constabelli. Tony just happened to be the best man in my grandparents' Pasquale and Lena's wedding. Tony married Clara, Lena, my grandmother's sister. So I didn't have this photo. Michael gave that to me and other photos. But this was significant because Clara passed away early in life. So I never got to meet her. I never was able to know a lot about her. So this connection was godsend in lots of ways, not only to find out more about Clara and Tony, but also they are both within storyline. So it was great being able to find out information about them. Michael also shared with me information on research that he had done about his Italian relatives that were also from the Geneva, New York area. It turns out or a good majority of individuals that lived in the Little Italy section of Geneva, New York, were from Ortuccio, Italy. That's where my great-grandparents were from, Lena's parents. So Michael, when he told me about the Ortuccio Club, he told me about some resources that I could use to find out more information. So I got to work. I found out about an Ortuccio Club organization, how they were formed, bylaws, who the officers were. And then I also found out that the Ortuccio Club held an annual summer picnic. That was really, really a great find and was incorporated into storyline. The late Romeo Valiente. Romeo was a resident of Westminster, Maryland. And it happens that when I was working for Carroll County government, the day that I met Romeo and told him who I was and who my parents were, Romeo's mouth dropped. He was really surprised and kind of taken aback. He had to sit down and he proceeded to tell me all kinds of things about my Italian grandparents. He told me that his father, shown in this photo, Vincent, was the owner of Merchant Taylor in downtown Westminster. And this is, he started in the 1920s. So the two Italian families way back would get together. Vincent and his wife, Josephine, they invited the Donofrio family to celebrate Christmas and holidays over top of the Merchant Taylor where they resided. So that was really great to find out and interesting. But Romeo shared with me lots and lots of other things that he remembered about my grandparents. So meeting Romeo and knowing Romeo was a special occurrence. It just so happens that Romeo's daughter, Carroll Valiente Hammond, worked for Carroll County government. I had questions about Romeo. So I called Carol one day, or contacted Carol, and she invited me to her home. And Carol shared with me all kinds of memories about the Valiente family. And she allowed me to take photos of her precious photos. And this is one of the photos that she has on the wall in her home. So this shows her grandparents, Vincent and Josephine Valiente, and their children. And her father, Romeo, is pictured here in the center. So this information was important for storyline as well. I found that I still had so many questions. Examples include, how do you drive a Model T? What were the fashions in the 20s and 30s and 50s? How do I find court records? Well, it seemed like a million things that I needed to find out. So I turned to lots of resources: the Historical Society of Carroll County, the Carroll County, Maryland Courthouse, the Geneva, New York Historical Society, the Canandaigua, New York, Ontario County Courthouse, the Maryland State Archives in Annapolis, and my local library, the Guthrie Memorial Library. These were valuable resources. An example of how a government record can reveal so much: one piece of paper, a certificate of death. These are certificate of deaths for my Italian great-grandparents, Gitanio Casasanta and Florenza Casasanta. From a document such as this, I found out of the birth and death date, occupation of my great-grandfather, their parents' name and place of origin, their cause of death, and the funeral home where their arrangements were made. Land record research helped me to discover information about where my Italian family lived, and it was instrumental for storyline. When I worked for Carroll County government, I worked with a gentleman named Bill Powell. He was program administrator at that time. And Bill taught me how to do land record research because it helped farmers to save them money when they were coming into the land preservation program. So fast forward, that job skill helped me when I was conducting land record research to find out lots and lots of things, such as I wanted to find out, for example, where my grandfather lived in New York, but he rented. So I had wanted to find out who the owners of the properties were. The Historical Society of Carroll County was helpful. I went to visit with lots of questions about St. John's Church in the early days. I needed to verify information about people and places in the 50s. So Mimi Ashcroft was very helpful. She pointed me in the right direction and found out lots of information. The Historical Society of Carroll County also was helpful in providing me with some photos that I needed, some period photos from the 50s. Specifically, Kathy Beatty found this photo for me to show me what Westminster would have looked like in the 1950s. This was important because I wanted to get authentic detail for storyline involving the drive to the Carroll County Courthouse in the 1950s. The Geneva, New York Historical Society had important resources. One was on the nursery industry back in the day. So I wanted to find out what it was like for my grandfather as an Italian to work as a laborer in the nursery industry. They had resources and directories as well. I was able to find out information on the church where my grandparents were married. A lot of precise detail. The Geneva Historical Society also had posted some information regarding the Italians, what it was like for them, what their experience was like in the early 1900s. So Italians, according to this Geneva Courier newspaper article in 1903, they were not welcome in Geneva, New York. So I learned about the social barriers that my grandparents and my great-grandparents would have experienced. The Historical and Genealogical Society of Indiana County, Pennsylvania was helpful because I needed to find out information about my great-grandfather Gitanio's experience as a coal miner in the coal mine town of Ernest, which is just north of Indiana County, or Indiana in Indiana County. So they had They had a museum that I was able to tour, and they had a lot of resources that I was able to reference. So I was very successful over the years and accumulated a lot of information, but it seemed like over the years there was always a reason that I couldn't find time to write. I was working full time. I was busy with home and work responsibilities. It just seemed like when I just could never find the blocks of time that I needed. So when I was almost 54, it was 2006, Labor Day weekend, I had a heart attack. And that really did change my priorities in life. My husband, Clay, he wanted me to slow down and to focus on what I wanted to do. And I told him that more than anything, I would like to have time to be able to write my grandparents' story. So then my new career became writing the manuscript. I got busy, organized all my records, and developed a timeline. I created a spreadsheet to be able to track ages of characters. And then I got serious about writing the manuscript. My dog in this photo did not. These are photos. One on the left are all my records from genealogy research and book research. On the right is a depiction of all the photo collection that I had accumulated over the years. And these are pages and pages of information. This is the Excel spreadsheet that I created to be able to track individuals' ages in the book by the year. The room where I wrote the book, the manuscript, is here, and the timeline is here. And I used it to help me stay on track, to know world wars and depression eras, marriages, deaths, things like that. There's, on my website, there's a pictorial tree of book characters. Some of them are real people and some of them are fictional. The Bella Rose and Dianthus Bobby was published in late December of 2019. And we'll take a tour of some of the places explored within the book. We'll start in Italy. We are looking at a photo that Pasquale had taken of his homeland. He visited in 1950s. This is Roccasale. You'll see an olive tree here. The photo is not very clear, but I wanted to use it because it's a photo that he had taken. So there's a valley, and then to the west, more and more mountains. So when Pasquale was 17 years old, so it was 1920, he left this homeland area of Roccasale, and he had to say goodbye to his entire family. Pasquale then traveled to the coast of France. He boarded the Niagara and took a 10-day cruise to the United States. He would have come to the Statue of Liberty, and then he would have boarded a ferry that would take him to Ellis Island, where he would be screened for entry into the United States. Passing, he would take a train that would bring him to Geneva, New York, and beautiful Seneca Lake. He would find employment with Rice Nursery as a laborer, and he would soon meet Lena, beautiful Lena Casasanta. And this is what Geneva would have looked like in the upper left-hand corner, and also this photo to the right. This is Seneca Lake as it meets Geneva. Seneca Lake is one of the Finger Lakes in New York. Geneva is at the very tip of Seneca Lake. Watkins Glen would be at the southern tip. This is a postcard from the 1920s. This is Lakeside Park. This park is no longer in existence, so this postcard is a treasure, providing lots of details, lots of visual details. Pasquale and Lena would have courted within this location. This is the church where Pasquale and Lena were married in 1924, St. Francis de Sales Church in New York, Geneva, New York. A postcard depicting Castle Street. This is what Castle Street looked like in the early 1900s. There was a memorial fountain in the very center of the street. having this postcard also is a treasure. Pasquale and Lena traveled on the street in a Model T on their wedding night. There's a true story that is incorporated into storyline about this location. The book takes us on a side trip, kind of through conversation, to Pennsylvania, to Puxatawny, Ernest, and Indiana. The church on the left is the church in Indiana, Pennsylvania, St. Bernard Church, where Lena was baptized in 1907. The town of Ernest, where Lena was born. Gitano, her father, worked as a coal miner in this coal mine town. You'll see the company store. No, if you can, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but the company store is here in the center. To the right, you can see the rail line. And then you can see lots of coal mine activity surrounding the homes. So Lena really was only here for about a year. The family moved to Geneva, New York, where Gitano had found work as working above the ground. He was going to become a state road construction worker, a laborer. After Pasquale and Lena were married in Geneva, they lived there for a couple of years. They started their family, and they left to come to Westminster, Maryland. So they arrived in Westminster in 1929, and this is what Westminster would have looked like back at that time. And the location of Westminster in Maryland. Pasquale and Lena and their children attended the church that is in this photograph. This is St. John's Catholic Church. It's no longer in existence, but this used to be on East Main Street in Westminster. The church was beautiful. The sanctuary is shown here. This happens to be a photo from my parents' wedding. It's Calvin Dutterer and Nancy Donofrio Dutterer. Calvin's parents are on the right and Lena's parents are on the left. It was a magnificent sanctuary. A photo of Carroll Gardens about 1937. When Pasquale came to Westminster in 1929, he first came because he was going to go to work as a propagation specialist with Westminster Nursery. He did work there for 3.5 years, but he decided he wanted to start his own business. And so he did. He started selling plants in the early 1930s, and his business continued to grow throughout the years. Once the business was formed way back, it was called D&C Hardy Plant Nursery. And that stood for Pasquale Donofrio and Henry Casasanta, because Lena's brother, Henry, happened to come down from Geneva, New York with his wife Agnes and their son Howard. Henry went into business with Pasquale for a few years, but Henry and his family, they wanted to move back to the Geneva area, and they did. So Pasquale took over, he became the sole owner, and he named the business Carroll Gardens. And Carroll Gardens is located on the corner of 97 and East Main Street in Westminster. A photo on your left shows an advertisement in the Westminster Elementary School publication in 1937, advertising D&C Hardy Plant Nursery. On the right is a 1938 Times article indicating that Lena, or Miss Patsy Donofrio, was a part of a committee for fundraising at the elementary school. Lena, she was an excellent baker, and she donated her baked goods to lots of places, but including St. John's Catholic Church and public school fundraisers. These are some ads that were in the Times. And the earliest ad is the upper left. This is D&C Hardy Plants Nursery. On the left, on the lower left is also D&C Nursery, but it has Patsy Donofrio in bold letters. So this was probably the transition period. Then on the right, it's an ad from 1939. But through these advertisements, you can see how the business grew over the years. They definitely are carrying a lot, or Pasquale's definitely carrying a lot of nursery stock by 1939. This is a photo of the display gardens at Carroll Gardens between the 40s and the 50s. The Donofrio family moved from Gorsuch Road to Pool Road, which adjoins Carroll Gardens. So Pasquale could leave his home and walk directly next door to Carroll Gardens. The business continued to grow. By the late 60s, Carroll Gardens was carrying about 2,500 different species of plants. And then in addition to selling to local customers, the business was supplying 7,000 plants to the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society and the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens. About 15,000 herbs were shipped each year to the Washington Cathedral. And then during Carroll Gardens' busy season, they averaged 100 to 250 mail orders per week. And of those orders, they were shipped to every state in the United States and 13 foreign countries. And the business continued to grow into the 70s and 80s. This is a photo of Carroll Gardens about in the period of the 40s and 50s, showing the garden beds and the storage buildings in the rear. Pasquale in 1969 said, working in a nursery is something you have to like. You won't get rich overnight, and it means hard work and long hours. A photo from the 50s showing the business as it had grown at that point. You'll see the retail sales office and the greenhouse on the left, and some additions here in the rear and also on the side of the business. A 1955 ad tells us that Carroll Gardens did the landscaping for a big project called the Enchanted Forest, which used to be located in Ellicott City, Maryland. The VFW in Westminster is in the rear of where Carroll Gardens used to be located. In 1946, Pasquale donated land from Carroll Gardens to give to the VFW so they could build their new clubhouse. And that was 1946. The mid-1950s bring the Donofrio family to this courtroom, and this is the Carroll County Courthouse, now known as the Historical Courthouse. A 1969 article in the Carroll County Times, when the front page talks about Pat Donofrio and that he's a nursery artist, and the article goes on to tell all kinds of things about Pasquale's history and how successful the business was at that point in time. Lena Donofrio, she passed away in 1979, and I was 16 years old. 1983 brought the 50th anniversary of Carroll Gardens. You'll see Carroll Gardens catalog, the garden planning guide on your right-hand side. That was the 50th anniversary year. And within that, Pasquale wrote a letter to his customers and friends, thanking them for their patronage through the years. The business went on to transfer to Pasquale's son, John. A few years after Pasquale, I'm not sure if I made that clear. So Pasquale stepped down from the business at that point in 1983. He bid farewell to his friends and customers. And so just 2 years later, Pasquale passed away, and I was 22 years old when he died. I'm going to take a break for now, just to do a book reading. This is taken from chapter 8 of the book, and we are going to go back in time. This is Sunday, August the 19th, 1923. We're taking a peek into the cake auction. It's underway during the Tuccio Club's summer picnic. Lena glanced out into the crowd, searching for him. Seeing Pasquale and noticing his admiring eyes, she smiled and blushed. Doing great, man. Let us keep the bidding going. You all know pretty Miss Lena. She baked just like her mama. The men clapped. The single men in the crowd merged closer to the platform. They wanted a closer view of the charming young lady, and they anticipated bidding on her cake in hopes of winning her favor. Noticing much potential competition for his beloved Lena, Pasquale also advanced. He boldly walked forward and merged deliberately in front of all the men. What kind of cake you have here, Miss Lena? Asked Louis. This year, I make a pineapple skillet cake. I make it with fresh pineapple. Lena proudly removed the metal cover from the cake holder. Cake look delicious, Miss Lena. Do I hear 25 cents? Yelled Louis to the crowd. $25, yelled Pasquale. The young men gasped. They frowned and slowly backed away from the platform. They each understood that they'd not be able to afford Lena's cake. The young man clearly planned to outbid them. None of the other men in the crowd had that kind of extra money. Pasquale had given up some of his savings to bid such an outrageous price for the cake. He wanted to make a point to Lena and to all, and he did. Pasquale, in 1952, recorded his daughter's wedding on a motion picture camera, and it includes outstanding footage from the display gardens at Carroll Gardens. So I am going to share that with you now. We are seeing his daughter, Dorothy Donofrio, married Ken Heinrich. This is my mother, Nancy, and Ken's brother, his best man. They leave St. John's Church. They arrive at the BFW in Westminster. And Ken and Dorothy are going to walk around, and then they're going to go to Carroll Gardens, which adjoins the BFW. You'll get to see cars from that period of time and what it looked like back then. So now they arrive at Carroll Gardens. They are walking through the beautiful display gardens. This is 1952, May of 1952. So we see all the colorful tulips, lots of beautiful things to see. Sculpted shrubs. East Main Street is in the back. You might see a few vehicles passing through. So the wedding party they're walking through the gardens. Within all the colorful tulips, you'll see a flowering dogwood. And the wedding party moves forward. So we can peek and check out other items within Carroll Gardens, a bird bath in the rear. As Dorothy and Ken come forward, be sure to check out the left side of the screen where you're going to be able to see the rear storage buildings and more of the gardens. And you're also going to be able to catch a glimpse of the greenhouse and sales office, a very quick look. You just start to see them now, but the display gardens are absolutely wonderful. So I thank you all for allowing me to come here today and share with you the book, The Bella Rosa and Dianthus Bobby. I thank you again for being here. And I also want to thank there were a lot of contributors to this presentation and the book, and I'm forever grateful to everyone that has helped. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Brenda. This is really wonderful. This is really
Thank
wonderful.
you.
So now this is the part where we do invite some questions, but I've got just a couple of my own. So I will indulge myself and then invite other questions as well. But to kind of get the question juices flowing, I have to ask, are your other family members as interested in your family past as you are?
They definitely are. My sisters and my cousins, they are definitely very interested. And They have also helped. A lot of them through the years, they knew that I was conducting genealogy research. So we would all get together during family gatherings and share information. And that's not only been wonderful as a time to get together with family, but also just to share information and memories.
That is so terrific. So it became sort of a family hobby that you could all share.
Absolutely.
I bet holidays were interesting at your house. So now with your family coming directly from Italy, were there any language issues? Did you have to learn any Italian, or did you already sort of know enough to get by with what you needed?
When my grandparents came here, well, my grandfather, he just only could speak Italian, so he had to eventually learn to speak English once he came to Geneva in the early 20s. And my grandmother was she was born in the United States, so she had to learn to speak Italian. I'm sorry, she had to learn to speak English, and her parents also taught her to speak Italian. So my grandmother knew how to speak English. My grandfather had to learn. But when they had children, they didn't teach their children to speak Italian. From what my mom tells me, that they would communicate with each other in Italian when they didn't want their children to know what they were saying. So I learned, I had wanted, and I still want to go to Italy. So I've learned some Italian, some very basic words, but I have a long way to go.
So that was the same story in my family. My grandparents came from Sweden, and Swedish was the adult language the kids didn't understand. So, but it seems to have not gotten in your way to do all this research. So that's good. That's good.
Chris, just one moment. I'm answering a question in the chat. Folks, you are welcome to open your audio and video now and to ask questions directly of Brenda. So just unmute your audio and video and come on in and feel free to ask any questions you would like. But Chris, I'd just like to ask one question, if I may, just insert it in here. Brenda, did you take up the love of gardening? And if so, can we see any evidence of that from you? Absolutely.
I love to garden. I love to be creative. I'm an artist also, and I inherited those creativity genes from my grandparents. And yes, I love to garden, and I do have some photos. I thought, just in case I was asked, this is a photo of the front of our house in Hanover, showing some. I love roses and perennials and annuals. An example of I no longer could use my fountain, so I turned it into a planter. And this is these are some flowers and shrubs in the rear part of my property.
Beautiful.
So yes, I love to garden.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, so I do have a few questions in chat. One question that comes up is more of a technical question. It says, should we raise our hand function? Yes, you can do that, because Lynn will catch you if you put your hand up. I'll catch the written chats. I have from Jay Mueller. I remember well Mr. Donofrio and the front gate gardens. He was known for his propagations, including daylilies, and was the Dianthus Bobby one?
Yes, it was. I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but yes, it was.
Great. Great. So that's the last of the chat questions I have. Do you have any raised hands, Lynn?
Well, I think Susan Blackman had a question.
Yes, I had two questions. One, you make reference to a tragedy that happened, but I didn't hear the details on that. And you also mentioned that Pasquale and Lena didn't live together at some point in their lives, and I was curious about that.
Yeah, those are two questions that I have to really point you to the book, because if I shared that information, I would be giving away storyline. So I hope you understand.
Brenda, were the tragedies true or were they part of your, the fiction that you created?
Yeah, unfortunately, the tragedy is indeed true.
Hmm. Wow. Wow.
And did it occur here in Westminster?
Yes, it did, in Westminster on Gorsuch Road.
Mm. Well, now you have me interested.
Yes. We have a number of participants with, oh, go ahead, Susan, did you have any other question?
No, I just wanted to know those things, but if she can't answer, that's the way it is.
David Schaefer has a question.
Yeah, hi there, Brenda. I'm David Schaefer. I'm pastor at a local church, St. Benjamin's Lutheran Church.
Hello.
Hello. David Schaefer.
Hi, Pastor David.
Yeah, from St. Benjamin's Lutheran Church. Hi, Brenda. I wondered if you had an opportunity to speak to a former employee of Carroll Gardens by the name of Mildred Benedict. Mildred worked for your grandfather and John, I think, for many years. She is only 96 years old. She would be a treasure for you to speak with. She has a lot of recollections about Carroll Gardens and her time working there.
Well, Pastor Schaefer, I have not spoken with her, but I wrote her name down. I'm going to make it a point to get in touch with her.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Be in touch with me and I can give you her number.
Oh, I
But,
certainly will.
She was a very good worker for your family, I believe. Just continues to have a love of flowers. She'd get a kick out of speaking with you. I know that.
Oh, thank you, Pastor Schaefer. I will definitely do that. I'll be in touch with you. Thank you.
No problem.
By the way, you can see that Brenda's book is available through the Historical Society shop and the Union Bridge gift shop, but also on December 4th, if you're looking for Christmas items, we're having an open house at the Historical Society and Brenda will be there signing books and selling her book. Now I have a question from somebody who's identified as iPhone. So iPhone, if you want to go ahead and ask your question, you have a raised hand. Hello, iPhone, we can't hear you. Can you hear us? Okay, well, I don't know what happened. Maybe whoever it is will come back. But right now, iPhone, you just muted iPhone. There you are. Can you speak? I'm sorry, we can't hear whoever it is. Does anyone else have any questions of Brenda or any comments?
I just have one last one then, since I don't see anyone on chat asking any questions. Brenda, what do you feel like was the most rewarding part of all this work for you personally? What really is the high point? This is so much work and so much effort.
Boy, that's almost a hard one because it was rewarding in so many ways. But I think it was to share what happened to my grandparents. When I found out how significant their story was, that it really did seem as though God was inspiring me over the years. So I felt like I had this enormous goal, and it was great to be able to accomplish it and to be able to accomplish it for my Italian grandparents.
Brenda, can you tell us what happened to Carroll Gardens? You know, it's closed now. I remember going there, and I'm so thankful that folks in the community told me about it, and I loved it. And I have many plants in my yard, which I'm sure many of us here do. What happened to the business?
Yeah, from my understanding, that after the business had gone on to my uncle John Donofrio, and then he sold the business, and someone else had taken it over. And unfortunately, I think that whatever happened, they couldn't continue on with the business. So currently, I checked recently to find out who owned the property. And in front of you is, I'm not sure if you can still see my screen, but I
Yes, you can. Yes.
was able to find out that it's 7 acres and it's just currently owned by a partnership. So I'm not sure what's going to be done with it. I have dreams about maybe what could be done with it, but right now it's there, and it really makes me cry when I go by to see that, to remember what it used to be back in the day.
Well, it's nice the sign's still up. That's a great reminder for all of us. Are there any Donofrios in the landscaping or gardening business now?
Yes, my cousin Pat, he owns a very successful landscaping business in California. And my youngest sister, Billy worked for my grandfather for several years, and while she was attending college. And now Billy works for Sun Nurseries. And Billy is the sister that I go to if I have questions about plants. She helped me with the book, as a matter of fact, helping me understand a little bit more about propagation. And Billy's the one that, if I know common names to plants, but Billy knows the Latin names. And so yes, they definitely got that nursery bug from my grandfather.
Well, I'm glad that Billy is on this Zoom with us right now. And I'm sure many of us have had the great pleasure of going to the amazing Sun Nurseries. And I'm sure that your grandfather would have loved that property as well. It's quite an inspiration to go there.
Absolutely.
All right, well, Brenda, we want to thank you so much for your time to give us a journey behind your book, the Bell Rose and the Dianthus Bobby. I want to just say that it's so interesting to kind of peel back the covers and look at the creative side. Often we hear from authors, but we don't get to hear the really personal family side of all the research that you did. And I just find it lovely. I really want to thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chris, and everyone. Thanks for being here today. It was wonderful being able to share my grandparents' story with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, before we say goodbye to the group, I would like to just tell you about a couple things coming up for the Historical Society. Coming up September 10th, we've got our big Bluegrass Bourbon and Bocce event out at Rob's Bluegrass Barn. And that is a really fun bluegrass event with Sideline, which is probably the second biggest bluegrass band in the nation. They're coming to spend time with us on September 10th. I would suggest you get your tickets as early as you can, because first of all, there's a discount if you get them early, but also we sold out the last time we held this event. So you're not going to want to wait till you see what the weather's like. Definitely just get your tickets and have them in your back pocket. It's a fundraiser for us, and there'll be burgers and fries that are handmade on site, and you'll really enjoy the evening. You can even learn to play bocce. We'll have a bocce ball instructor there. On September 18th, we're going to host a Deer Park Methodist Cemetery walking tour. Deer Park Methodist Cemetery has their cemetery historian who will take us through. Now, this is really a very inexpensive thing if you want to just take a walk with us. This time around, we're only asking $5. And if you want to buy the book, which was also put out by this person who's giving us the tour, you can buy it right at the Maryland shop. So we're not doing a book package and tour this time, because the book is going to be right on site where you can purchase it individually. But this walk will be on September 18th. It will be meeting at 10 o'clock out at the cemetery. And I have to say, these cemetery talks have been very, very popular. People really love getting out, walking around. It's a nice, safe kind of activity. And it's a lot of fun to see sort of who's who among the stones. So come join us for that. That's been sold out the last couple cemetery tours we've done. So again, I would suggest getting on our website and buying those tickets quick. On September 21st, our next box lunch talk is going to be on a 19th century death examined. And believe it or not, Kathy Beatty and I are going to pull it together and do a box lunch talk. And we'll be focusing in on Elizabeth Sherman and the Sherman family, who was the first folks who lived in the Shellman house. And Elizabeth Sherman died in 1842. I find that time period so fascinating when it comes to death customs. And we're doing a lot of research because we want to set the Shellman house to approximately her death. So we will have October weekend events which will have the house look like a funeral is about ready to happen in the Sherman house. And Elizabeth Sherman died in 1842. So that's where we're focusing our research on. And Pastor David, she was a member of your congregation. So hopefully you'll be interested in that talk as well. But that box lunch talk will also be on Zoom. However, when we get to October, I'll be telling you right now, we've got the go-ahead from Grace Lutheran Church to be back in person for a talk on the ghosts of Carroll County. So that'll be October 19th, Grace Hall. They'll be opening up to us as long as everything stays good. We'll be back in person. And I hope, is there anyone else who has any questions they'd like to bring up? Did I miss anything?
Well, we're excited that in October, Pat Hahn, who is an outstanding librarian at the Westminster Library, has been leading the ghost tours for many years and has a wonderful story to tell. She was in our gardens last year when we did our partnership with the Chamber of Commerce. And we're delighted to have Pat speaking at that box lunch talk. So please come back and join us, grab some cookies and a drink and listen to ghost stories that Pat will present. It should be great fun. And we're thankful that she's going to share her experience from the library for this program.
So thank you one and all. I think this is the end of our program for today. And again, thank you so much, Brenda. We really appreciate it.
Thank
Have
you.
a great
all.
day.
Thank you. Bye,
If
everyone.
anyone else
Thank
has
you.
anything to say to Brenda, I'll keep this on if you want to have a few words with Brenda. All right, then thank you all very much for attending. We appreciate it and
Thanks, everyone.
stay well and enjoy the rain. Take
Bye,
care.
everyone. Thank you.
Brenda, thank you very much. You did
You're
an
welcome.
excellent
Thank
job.
you all. Thank you.
Take care. See you.